Not over.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Indie Comics Relay. I'm your host, Keith Gleason, creator of the Mighty Mascots and promoter for the Plastic City Comic Con. With me is always Johnny C., creator of Sartana, Surrounded by Death, and The Pond, for Roger. And our third co-host, Harry G., graphic artist extraordinaire. Hey. What's going on, fellas? How's it going? How was your Thanksgiving?
It was okay. It was good.
It was okay.
I just cooked a big bird, and slapped it around a little bit, buttered it up a little bit, and put some lemon.
Same with us.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Amy cooked Johnny. She got all into cooking the bird, kind of like you are with with barbecue and things like that. Like she brined it up and did all this stuff to it. And it had a really nice, best turkey I've ever had, I think.
I had a really good turkey this year too. It was very juicy. It was kind of, so when you go to cut the breast, you cut down below and then you cut the slices. Ours kept falling apart. It was so juicy. It was really good. But what we do differently is we put bacon across the top. So we don't butter it.
Oh, really?
Or use olive oil. We just layer bacon across it, and that bacon fat helps render the meat, but keeps it real juicy. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, cool. Interesting. I've never heard of that. Wow.
Yep.
I don't know if Amy would do that because she's not
she's not a pork person.
But maybe would that work with turkey bacon or no? Probably not, right?
Maybe.
I don't like mixing animals together. You know what I mean? Like animals that wouldn't ordinarily be on the same place.
Yeah, right. I know we want to keep the banter short because we have a great guest tonight. Now, Johnny, before we get into that, Dr. Mask is asking, when are we going to see more Surrounded by Death?
It's a great question. So I just very recently at New York Comic Con, I kind of had an update meeting with Joe Martinez, my illustrator and very good friend. And he just completed his work with Ninja Sex Parties comic, which you worked on, and I worked on, Keith. So now that that's through and done with, he's got like 1 or 2 commissions that he's kind of just finishing up with that are art pieces. And then he's going to be full force on finishing issue 3.
Nice.
But I've got the spin-off that I'm working on. So I'm hoping to maybe launch a campaign by sometime next year, back half. That's the best answer I can give right now. Tentative.
So then
not
we
a
might
hard,
actually
not a hard date.
Might have 2 things going on, huh? Like
I plan on launching the campaign to have both issue 3 and the spin-off number 1.
Oh,
in
like
one
what
campaign.
we were talking about. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. That was the idea. I think that's what I'm
that's
gonna be
awesome.
doing.
That'd be great. Yeah.
That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, that sounds great. Dr. Mass said looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm still playing around with that idea for me as well. Although like I'm thinking about, since it's issue 10 of the Mighty Mascots, I might do like a double size thing. I actually had a guy reach out to me that just wants to draw like a 6-page story for me. Mm-hmm. He's really good artist. Like he's very his stuff looks like good Hanna-Barbera art, like cool. Very animated. I think it would go really well with the book. So I'm thinking of maybe doing something like that, like double sized, maybe have a couple little short stories and some pinups and things like that, And
so another thing I was thinking of, sorry, Keith, I didn't mean to step on you. No, but one thing I was thinking of is, and actually this is something I've been debating a lot lately, is whether I should make this new project a spin-off of Surrounded by Death or just make it an annual. Because my intention is to make it an annual release. At least one a year. So that's where I'm kind of debating things right now. Do I make it Surrounded by Death, or do I do a spinoff, or do I just call it the annual and do that?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, debating. I mean, it's still tied to the universe, right? So maybe an annual might be the way to go.
Just because you don't see annuals in indie comics, right?
Yeah, no one does.
So maybe it would be kind of cool to do that. We'll see. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out.
Dr. Mask is all about it, so the annuals are cool. I like it. Yeah, I do too. Like they you know what they finally started doing too. Like I remember annuals were used to be like, even when I was working at the shop, everyone would be like, "No, I don't want the annuals." But now
they're kind of low quality.
Yeah, they were, and now I think like DC figured out that if they keep the same creative team doing the regular book, do the annual, people will buy the annual. So I think that's what's been happening, lately, which is good, because like, no one wants to read like some kind of offshoot thing with like not the same creative team, So,
right.
But yeah, no, it's not a bad idea. But all right, yeah, maybe we'll talk about that on a future episode. I'd love to hear more about that.
We'll put a pin on it for now, and we'll circle back around later.
Yeah, maybe we can hash some stuff out together,
But importantly, thank you for the interest, Dr. Mask. That means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So Johnny, I know you met Ben in San Diego, right? Can you set it up a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at our booth in San Diego, there's always people around us who have other booths, and right across from us was a indie comic studio that had a really awesome setup and very outgoing people who were helping bring people into the booth. And one of the people was the individual who's our guest tonight, who had a really awesome story that he shared with me. And I felt like it would be perfect to bring him on the show so he can share his story with everybody else and how kind of comics changed his life. So,
awesome.
Yeah,
I love hearing that. And then, and it also helps break our 3-week streak with no guests. We finally have a guest to show up this week, so that's great. What was I going to say? So without further ado, I say let's go on and bring tonight's guest in. So without further ado, here's tonight's guest, Benjamin Frandsen. Hey, Ben. Thanks for joining
everybody. Thanks for having me.
Hey, how are you?
Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Yeah, definitely. Usually we start the show off with like, your influences in comics, things like that. But you have such a unique story that I think we should just kind of start there, like just learn about you as a, and how you found comics, and so the floor is yours, Ben. Let's hear it.
Thank you. So going to Comic-Con briefly. It's actually Johnny's across the way neighbor there 2 Comic-Cons in a row, because as I found out this last time, they let you keep the same spot as long as you're kind of grandfathered into that spot if you get a spot you like. And when he was talking about doing an annual comic, I couldn't help but remember the art he had up then that was like crazy escalator, all this stuff that everybody who's had to go through the ordeals of Comic-Con has seen before. And that thing really stuck with me. It was like all these monsters and costumes and people and lines and everything was really cool. It really kind of captured the intensity of the Comic-Con madness. So
thank you, Ben.
Backing up, yeah, I appreciated it. So my story is unique. I just about 2 years ago posted my first social media post ever, which was on LinkedIn. And it was really supposed to be an homage to my mom, because my mom had passed away a few years ago, but I was sort of achieving one of my life milestones that I had really hoped she would be there to see. And depending on your faith, I believe she is now anyways. But I posted, after spending 18 years in prison for a murder I did not commit, last week at the age of 48, I was accepted into UCLA. I was born at UCLA, and I am living proof it's never too late to start a new chapter. And a couple of weeks later, a buddy of mine who's a DJ said, "Hey, have you looked at the number of views on that post, man?" And I said, "I just found out what a post is. I don't know how to look at views on a post." And he said, "Scroll down." So I looked at the number and was kind of stuck on stupid for a second. And he said, "Over 1 million people read your story, bro." And I stupidly said, "Why?" He said, "I don't know. It looks like 50 people reshared it." So not long after that, UCLA Magazine called and said they wanted to write a story about my acceptance. They have this kind of an annual thing they do called This Magic Moment, which is like where people were when they found out they got in, because it's a very competitive school.
Ben, before you go any further, could you kind of sum up like what that post was on social media? Like what did you actually say in the post that got people like talking?
Sure, no problem. I've been through that. I've actually had other people try to figure that out too, because it hasn't been repeated. I wasn't particularly trying to do that, but I'll read it from the link tree. It was very short.
Okay,
I did,
yeah, that'd be great.
One thing I did do in the process was I looked up how best to treat something like that, and they said make a point of responding to each person who likes it, saying thank you for your interest in my story. It'd be great if you'd reshare it. So I actually did take the time to do that. And it says, "After spending over 18 years in prison for a murder I did not commit, I'm incredibly grateful for all the second chances God has given me out here in my new life. In 1974, I was born at UCLA Hospital. Last week, at the age of 48, I was accepted into UCLA. I'm living proof that it is never too late to start a new chapter." And I hashtag grateful, second chance, and UCLA before I had the faintest idea what a hashtag was.
Yeah, well, that's
first and foremost.
Yeah,
congratulations on the UCLA acceptance. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
And so now the UCLA thing. So you got accepted into the college. Is that what it was? Is like a student
as a student? Yes.
Okay.
In fact, it made for kind of a funny moment, because while they were ironing out my appeal, I still technically had a parole officer.
Okay.
So he called me and said, "Hey, I need to do a home visit." And I said, "Oh, define home." He's like, "What?" I said, "Well, I'm not in South Central where my parole was supposed to be." And he said, "You mean you move without permission?" I said, "Well, no." He's like, "Well, it must be without permission because it says right here on the computer." And I said, "Okay, if I develop a rapport with someone, I will never throw them under the bus. With that same mantra in mind, if you and I develop a rapport, I will never throw you under the bus. I wouldn't do the same to your predecessors, but suffice it to say that everybody knows that I'm here. It's no secret, and I have the text threads to prove it." And he said, "Well, what are you doing in Westwood?" I said, "I'm at UCLA." He said, "For what?" I said, "I'm a student." He said, "You transferred from prison to UCLA?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he laughed and hung up. So it wasn't until the next day, apparently somebody told him I wasn't making it up, and he came over in disbelief and said, "Do you have any kind of documentation that shows that you go here?" And so I looked at the coffee table and I said, I don't know, is that a document?
Yeah, right.
Here we have the I got in thing.
Yeah.
In fact,
are you on there? Are you on that picture? Oh, there you are, right there.
Yeah, there you are.
Oh, wow.
In fact, that's the same Street Fighter shirt I was wearing when I first got to Comic-Con.
Nice.
Had to date myself a little bit.
That you did he think like you doctored that up in Photoshop or something? You know,
I don't think so, because it's the last actual hard copy magazine.
It's a hard copy.
Had.
Oh, good. Yeah. No, that's awesome.
In
fact, he's got an article in there too. Look at that.
That's so good, dude. I love it. So
that's
now,
awesome, Ben.
So when did you get accepted to UCLA? Was that recently?
Just 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
At prison at the time, they did not have 4-year degree programs. So when I applied to UCLA, I had 9 associate's degrees, and admissions was like, but they didn't allow us to take 4-year degree programs. So I just kept taking classes.
Wow. 9 associate's degrees. That's amazing.
Well, I just kept studying because I wanted to do something. And so when I got in there, they were really cool about it. They also, not long ago, the Daily Bruin ran another article. If you Google my first and last name and Daily Bruin, it'll pop up. And that was actually because of Comic-Con. So obviously, when I first got arrested, I was facing the death penalty. It was a complicated case, but they knew the entire time that it wasn't me, which is frustrating. But they were trying to get me to testify against someone else that everyone was scared of. And rather than just kind of lose myself there, I decided to sort of take solace in something I'd always done, which was write. So I started writing a lot. And in fact, Pei-Wan, the CEO of and founder of Immortal Studios, he and I knew each other prior to that. And I actually wrote a screenplay that was about, I wanted to do a script that had the samurai and the Chinese in the same story, and not in the cheesy Kung Fu theater way, but kind of alongside each other. And
were you writing this when you were still in prison? Is that where it started?
With 4-inch golf pencils with no lines.
My God.
Wow. My poor girlfriend
I can't even like
type it and
like, I know I wouldn't do well in prison, you know, like I'm just not like the type to do it. But I admire like how you took this negative situation and turned it into a positive. Like I find that like inspiring. Like it's hard to do something like that, you know? And
I tried to look at it like I had a line from a poem that said, "Torn in pieces till I'm whole. A diamond's not but pressured coal." And there's some of that. There's some of the kinds of pressures that go on. So anyway, someone I was dating, as much as you can date someone when you're stuck in a prison, was trying to type the stuff for me. And I used to write in copperplate. And she's like, "Okay, in screenplays, caps mean something different, and you're getting 60 lines per page, and there's no lines. I don't know what any of this says. You're going to have to learn how to write with actual lowercase letters and stuff." But so I finally got a draft together, sent it to a few people. Pei-Wan was one of those, and he came and visited me at the LA County Jail, and we talked about he became attached to that as a script. It got sent around a few times. That actually led to me writing a different script, which I wrote the treatment and the first draft of the script, and I worked with a story analyst that Pei-Wan hired through Immortal Studios. That was actually, then it was Orb Media, and now he has since founded Immortal Studios. But that was Matt Stukin. Matt's one of the writers for the Knights of the Zodiac, and he wrote like one of the Cloverfield horror movies and things like that.
Oh, cool.
So that was fun at Comic-Con because Pei-Wan texted me and said, "Hey, Matt's here." So I went to the panel, and afterwards he and his writing partner Josh ducked out the side door, and I was chasing after them because I had talked to him every day on the phone for 4 or 5 months, sometimes 5-6 days a week, but we never met. So at the time I had a life sentence. So I turned the corner and called after him, "Matt," and everyone else was mobbing the stars, but I didn't care about them. I wanted to find Matt. And he turned and looked at me kind of strangely, and I said, "Hey, it's Benjamin." And he was like, "Oh my God. Okay. How are you doing? Can I give you a hug?" And he told his writing partner, "Remember the guy that I was working with that was, in that one place?" so that was a kind of a cool evolution. So I started writing that script, but that original, without giving away too much of the company secrets, that script turned into sort of the seed for a bigger storyverse that Pewan created. And so he was a part of that process. Even then, I wasn't writing my own personal story. That was all his story. I was just working on it for him and with him. And so that expanded. And after I got into UCLA, Pewan is also a UCLA Bruin alumnus. At one point, he just sent me a text and said, okay, I think it's time to talk story. So we got together and started talking about things that had been created. And up to this point, all of the main characters in the Immortal Storyverse have been Asian. Okay. So I was already thinking about how to do the story and asking if I could have some help with the character, because I thought this one would be Asian too. And he said, nope, this one's a white guy. It's like, this is going to be the first.
Now I want to take a step back too, to like try to explain the audience too. So now the studio is called Immortal. Is it called
Immortal Studios?
Immortal Studios.
Like and on Instagram, it's Immortal Wuxia, WUXIA.
Okay. How long have they been putting out stuff? Has it been
several years now? And they're on. In fact, their current Kickstarter campaign, which is one of my purposes here to plug the fellow writers.
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll pop that up shortly here too.
Half of what I want to
so they were making comics and stuff like that, and like and then you got involved because you knew the CEO, right? Would that be accurate?
Well, it wasn't as simple as good old fashioned nepotism of, hey, I know this guy. He actually sort of removed himself from the process and just said, hey, this amounts to an audition, but I'm gonna let you write and submit this stuff. So I then submitted those things to the other writers and to the publishers, and they looked at what I had written and said, actually, I think I could work with you. I like your prose. And for me, what I noticed about comics, I didn't grow up with that many comics. I got into comics much later. Was that when I was making these screenplays, I didn't have any software, so I was using colored index cards for scene cards and making little color designators so I know which main character was in which scene. So if I'd lost a character for too long, I could keep track of it. And then I would make smaller ones when I would write the treatment, because in a treatment, the higher up the food chain you are in Hollywood, the shorter of a treatment you're willing to read, And
absolutely.
And at one point I was looking at the storyboard and went, this is a comic. Like I realized that the storyboard process of screenplays is essentially a graphic novel, because
I've said that for years. Like I've told people, like anyone that actually wants to learn how to make comics should look at storyboards from movies for inspiration,
I love hearing about your color coding method, Ben, because when I map out a story, I kind of do it in Paint, and I'll use circles and then connect the circles to each other to connect my story points. So like you were doing the same thing with index cards and color coordination. I love hearing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We also got a nice comment here from Tony James. Says, Benjamin, from one writer to another, your work ethic is both incredible and inspiring.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Yeah, that one interesting thing I'll have to add, because no good comic story is good without some sort of love interest. So I'm adding this because it's fun. But when I met Johnny before, I actually at that Comic-Con, 2 Comic-Cons ago in San Diego, met the woman that I'm now with and now love. Her name is Elisa Plata. And I met her because she was doing some promo stuff then. And I heard her talking just with this passion about how she became an activist and things. And I heard her voice before I really saw her, and just said, hey, would you be interested in being on a podcast? And she stopped and kind of gave me the up and down look. And I thought, oh no, I just became that dude at the party that says he's a photographer and he takes bikini photos. And I said, okay, look, here, I'm like, here's my link tree, here's the link to the podcast, listen to a couple episodes if it's interesting. And so she grabbed my phone and texted it to herself. And it wasn't until later, when I was telling the story to her now 16-year-old daughter, her daughter said, my mom's smooth. That's how she got your number. But I didn't know that I'd been out of prison for a few months. And so then she texted me a little bit later and said she had a coffee break, and we spent every break together all the way up until the very last day. And then finally at lunch on the last Sunday there, she said, okay, I'm going to say something crazy. And I said, okay, well, thanks for warning me. Most crazy people don't afford you that opportunity. And she said, so we haven't got to hang out for more than like 10 or 15 minutes at a time. I said, I know. And at that time, we had never held hands. We knew something was going on, but we just were spending time together. And she said, I don't even like this job. It's not what they promised me at all. If I go in right now and quit, can we leave? And I said, I mean, how would that even work? She said, I go in and say, you lied to me about this job. I want my last check. I quit. And I said, well, I was supposed to stay till like 7 or whenever for the last day. And she smiled and said, you're talking to people about a comic book that you haven't even written yet. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing. So, so I sent a text to Pewan and expecting him to say, no, we need you for teardown and everything. But him being a romantic himself said, well, go forth and conquer, young man. And I said, oh, okay. So we left and I didn't even know where we were going. We ended up just kind of going to the beach and going to get something to eat and spending the evening. Dude, and I drove home. Mm-hmm. But so they've teased us about that, calling that the Immortal Love Story there at Immortal Studios. And if Pewan has sort of a similar story that I won't tell without his permission. So if he pops in here, we'll let him do that. But Comic-Con is pretty sacred to me because of that. And so people that I meet, when somebody says, hey, like Johnny did and we connected to be here, then that means a lot to me because my heart and my brain are both involved.
Yeah, no,
that's special. That's a special moment. And I've met her too. She's a really great sales rep in terms of bringing people into the booth. Very personable, very outgoing, you know.
Did you get to see her quit, Johnny? I bet that was probably a fun moment.
Did not see that.
She actually did run the marketing campaign for this, and we had one of the only full panels there, which was pretty cool. She took the cool step of actually hiring not just the normal cute guy or girl brand ambassador, but actually hiring some social media influencers who were also brand ambassadors. So they were making 30-second reels and posting them to 6-figure followings. And so when we actually got the full panel there, we actually had to turn 30 people away, which is a happy moment considering that was definitely no guarantee at that Comic-Con with no studios or anything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the one thing that I love about, like, I've only been to San Diego literally once, and like it's just where everything happens. It's like the most happening Comic-Con, you know. And Johnny goes every year, and it's like I get a little jealous because Johnny's always there, but but no, Johnny, as you know, he meets everybody. He's brought us so many great guests to this show, so like, you know, just it's awesome, you know. So I get it, like I get that whole scene, you know. So so I guess what would be the next step in your story there, Ben? So like you wrote the screenplays, and then you had that light bulb moment that like, hey, this is a comic book, and then like where did you go from there?
So I started applying to schools, and in fact I got into UCLA as an English major, partially because I wanted to teach, and ultimately I'd really like to be able to do all the way to a PhD, have the stuff I'm publishing being something I'm teaching. A guy named Danny Snelson is my professor right now. He's teaching comic creation. You guys would love that class. We have to take notes the full time for class, and we have to turn in the notes, but all the notes have to be doodles. That's how he does attendance.
That's cool.
Oh wow, okay, really I like cool. That.
That's weird, Harry. You'd be really good at that.
Actually, yeah, I've done something similar to that because I had a jury duty one time for a semester. Like the first, like I was missing, you know, like art classes and other classes, and so the whole time, I mean, it was like the trial of the century 2 or something, because it was like on they had people from like you know, California coming in through video and like giving testimony. I'm like, what? It was like basically a medical malpractice suit. And not to get, you know, too involved, but anyway, it was a million witnesses. So I took my my notebook and I drew each witness and I wrote a little blurb about them. And that, you know, to the point where at the end of the trial or towards the end, the rest of the jurors were like asking me to borrow my notebook so they can remember who each juror was, each witness was, whatever. And then so I figured I lost a whole semester of classes. So I my professor asked me for that notebook because I told him about it. It's like, can I see it? And they gave me an A on it. It's like, all set. Sweet. That's the greatest experience. Like,
that's awesome.
That's great.
So while we're talking, we have another guest in the green room that I'm going to bring in right now.
Oh, awesome.
So that is Mr. How do you say it? Is it
Paywan?
Paywan. Hey, Paywan. Thanks for joining us. We're
good to see you guys again.
Yeah, no,
good to see you, Paywan.
Good to see you. Benjamin was kind of finishing up the story here, letting us know what how we got involved with your company. So it's kind of a good segue that you jumped in here too.
Well, it's actually such an amazing story. I can't believe it myself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it really is. Like I mean, I was telling Ben, like if I was in his shoes with the same situation, I don't even think writing would have been on my mind. Like, you know what I mean? It would have been just like shivering in a corner somewhere. I don't know. I don't know. Like,
you'd be writing help.
Yeah, exactly.
I won't speak for Ben, but I can't imagine that he hasn't had those moments. But I think for the most part, he's just an extraordinary story and an extraordinary person.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, and he's a hell of a guy too to come on the show.
Hey, Ben, was the story was that case ever resolved?
The perspective, like Ben is out here now, but there are times when we corresponded at length when it was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Oh,
I mean, things just could not have been more bleak, and there's no reason to believe that any of these strategies would work. So, but it's a testament to the human spirit, right?
Yeah, no,
it's beautiful that you have your freedom, Ben. Honestly,
yeah, it really is.
And Paywan actually was making the long drive to prison sometimes when we were working on a script. I had it worked out so I would write a typed treatment, give it to one of the guys in visiting. They would stick it in one of the prison package catalogs and slide it in there, and then they'd throw it on the table. And when we'd get there, I'd say, "Hey, Paywan, you want to see this prison package catalog?" And then I'd pull out the type treatment. And we tried. We had to get creative because there are a lot of obstacles.
No, I can imagine.
And his writing's also come a long way. I think Ben was always a natural writer and storyteller, but I think now a proud Bruin invested in the craft of writing. So very, very exciting stuff. And almost right away, because he was when he was writing from prison, and this is I'd imagine this is over 10 years ago. This is probably 14 years ago. This is an earlier version of my professional journey where a lot of the stuff we're doing at Immortal was really in the form of films. This is before we pivoted to really going graphic novels and comic books first. So yeah, this is it's kind of a full circle.
So yeah, so you're the CEO of Immortal Studios, right, Paywan?
Yes,
he's the founder.
So how long has Immortal Studios been around?
Officially, this is a pivot from a pivot. So Immortal Studios has been around, I would say, for 5 years.
Okay.
Previous to that, a lot of our projects existed in different silos, different movie projects, movie scripts, and of course I love your backdrop, by the way. I have a similar kind of.
Oh, thank you.
that the idea for Immortal Studios actually started way earlier when I was born. I was born into a family where my father was one of the top creators in this martial arts fantasy genre known as wuxia, and created all these books and read, so 61 novels that have spawned 31 movies and TV shows in Asia. So he was he was the new wave of the martial arts fantasy genre, taking it from kind of the ancient prose and language and modernizing it. He was modernizing it, of course, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And of course, when I came of age, became a creator myself and became a storyteller and became a founder and a CEO so that I could actually enforce the visions of these stories rather than relegating that to other people who worked on the finance and what have you. So ultimately, to protect the vision, I had to be on a journey to run my own stuff. So when you consider that, Immortal has been around, I would say, for eons. And
it's immortal, you could say. Yeah.
And also, just to tie on to something that Pewan just mentioned, he is also really, like, his Instagram handle is Ancient Futurist, and he and I worked on a business working with under the name of Ancient Future, and that was one he came up with. But that sums him up pretty well, because on the one hand, we are, of course, using things that are futuristic and trying to use technology to get the best version of a story out. But at the same time, he's very tied to these ancient traditions. Like, we had just very, very recently, we had this event called Immortal Shaolin at the $1 Million Theater, where, I mean, it was interesting to put that on Instagram and say the Shaolin Temple is coming to Los Angeles. Like, let that sink in for a minute. And so we were there Pewan was there with the abbot and all. There's these 3 incredible masters of Shaolin Kung Fu all on the stage at the same time. And so we were there getting photographed with, these timeless monks. I went to this banquet. Pewan invited me to a banquet there, and we got there. It was so interesting watching these Shaolin walking around, because I've been a bouncer. I was in the Marine Corps. I've worked red carpets where I'm trying to keep paparazzi. That's not what these guys are doing. These Shaolin are very serious, exactly as serious as they've been for hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years. And they're just looking to make sure no one's getting in striking distance of their abbot. So I saw kind of a funny moment where the police chief, and that was San Gabriel, was it, Pewan?
There's a few police chiefs. There were the the LA deputy force, and then there was the airport police, and then there's San Gabriel police, of course, and smaller city police departments. But anyways, yes.
So I saw one of them. A police chief got a call, and you could tell he was a chief with the 4 stars and everything. And he got up early. He was kind of rushing out, I guess. So he decided he was going to go shake the abbot's hand. So he just kind of walked over to try to shake his hand. These 4 Shaolin jumped up from opposite sides, like,
ready to fight. Wow.
Oh, my bad. I just overstepped. And he was looking at him kind of like a little bit like shocked, kind of like, do you know who I am? And they were like, don't care. You're not getting near our abbot. And I watched that and thought, this is so cool. It was a cool moment, because it was almost like their training is so intense and they're such incredible athletes, and their tradition is just so long-standing. It was sort of like having 4 or 5 tigers walking around the table with you, just in a living room.
Very cool.
Just their art is so beautiful. So it was a really cool moment, and I wanted to lift up Pewan for that, because he really has found a way to bring to the fore the ancient, but have his father's stories translated in a way that we can digest them in the West without having the full cultural knowledge of China at our disposal.
Yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
I was just gonna say, I remember, when we were in San Diego, you guys you told me on the fun fact about your connection to the Shaolin Temple and the Shaolin monks. I was just wondering if you could, for the audience, just expand upon that a little bit more and just kind of give a little bit more insight in the connection between Shaolin and Immortal Studios.
Well, let's start with the Shaolin first, because Shaolin is a temple that was created approximately 1,500 years ago. It's known as the official birthplace of Kung Fu, and a form of Buddhism that's known as Zen Buddhism today in the West, but originally when it launched in China was Chan Buddhism. So, of course, they created, because spirituality and martial combat met officially in Shaolin Temple, and they had a 1,500-year history of creating superhumans. So many superhumans have kind of been spawned as a result of this fusion of physical combat and conscious spiritual awareness. So they fused it together. So this is known as the birthplace of Kung Fu. Seriously. And it inspired people like storytellers throughout the ages. And of course, in modernity, when radio came out, or stage plays, or books, they spawned a whole generation of books. and then they spawned a whole generation of movies, and where it really kind of exploded in the West was a lot of these movies that were made in the Hong Kong Kung Fu craze. I would say probably a third of them were around Shaolin monks. So some of the favorites would be like 36 Chambers of Shaolin. More recently, things like Shaolin Soccer. Of course, when it came to the West, it inspired this show called Kung Fu with David Carradine.
Oh yeah.
And when that became like the most popular show on television at that time, Bruce Lee and others just kind of, and then there was the Wu-Tang Clan. It became fully pop culture. Meanwhile, Shaolin continued to exist as a place that continually fused this kind of practice. Of course, as this kind of Shaolin craze took over, it inspired things like it is on our stage at the Immortal Shaolin event. We actually pulled the veil back and really revealed authoritatively that it was Shaolin Kung Fu that inspired The Last Airbender, Avatar: The Last Airbender, directly inspired by Shaolin Kung Fu, in addition to just countless other types of storytelling. And I met the Shaolin abbot about 20 years ago when we were giving back-to-back lectures or presentations. The Chinese government invited a bunch of filmmakers. I was a movie producer at the time, fairly active both in Hollywood and China. So I was invited to give a talk. My father was invited to give a talk. Sammo Hung was invited to give a talk. Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, and the Shaolin abbot was there. So we kind of hit it off. I never thought that I would really connect with the real Shaolin Temple, but I did. He invited me to visit him, and I did. And I was kind of taken by the hand and walked into the deep, deep reality of this ancient institution. And before you know it, I was meditating with the monks and invited to a lot of these ancient rituals that take place in an unbroken way, like 49 days of meditation that lasted for about 16 hours a day, the rigors of that kind of practice. So that kind of, up until now, I was a Wing Chun Kung Fu practitioner, which is what Bruce Lee started with. So I walked into the temple and I was given kind of an understanding from this unbroken tradition. And before you know it, the abbot asked me if I would join him as an advisor. And eventually I would help them produce a reality show called K-Star, the search for the next Kung Fu action hero worldwide. So I traveled the world with them and met tens of thousands of the best martial artists. We developed some games. I was involved in the production of an updated Shaolin Kung Fu movie that have already been shot and executed and have generated hundreds of millions of dollars in returns. So, and then some really exciting things like chairing the Shaolin Summit for the first time in the West, which I did 12 years ago. So that's just kind of the Shaolin backstory. And so when it came time for me to really, really launch Immortal, to breathe life into this ancient, this timeless genre known as the martial hero genre that Shaolin is directly part of, I wanted to start that universe with a total ode to Shaolin. So when we launched our first property called The Adept, I said, this has to be infused by Shaolin. So we started with a story of a young Asian American woman who started having these reappearing dreams of being taught by a Shaolin master in her dreams. And that was The Adept. That's how we launched the Immortal Storyverse. And we followed it up with another ode because we wanted to do the origin story of the Shaolin monk in the original Adept, which launched Fa Sheng.
Awesome.
Which
so
is
are
one
you
of the okay. So I continued this relationship with them, and the abbot reached out to me not too long ago and asked me and said that they were coming. He was interested in coming to the States. He hadn't been here for about 12, 13 years since the last Shaolin Summit. And he asked me if he could partner with Immortal. And he asked me if I would kind of present them in the way that I felt was warranted. I took a look at how they were really sharing their knowledge and information, how they were choreographing their martial arts, how that they were just explaining it, and how oftentimes they actually left out deep meditation and the softer technologies and the practices that really brings the magic to Shaolin. So that was how Immortal Shaolin was launched. We basically had like 45 days to pull it together, and not just the event, but really kind of bring in a whole new vibe. And so I really felt like we captured lightning in a bottle when we coined it the past, present, and future of Kung Fu, and really just kind of throwing this in the future, because you guys know that this kind of stuff is actually mainstream in the West.
Yeah, no, it is. It definitely is.
People are thinking
there were some interesting moments.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say there are interesting moments during the performance. Like at first I was a little bit wary of trying to bother any, the abbot or the other masters, but I kind of suddenly was one of the stagehands. So I ended up having to be like, sorry, sir, you got to go on right now, and had to go back and forth. And at one point when the kids, because there were these student classes there and they had these really cool performances, very intricate, all these kids with the weapons and swords and everything. And at one point they were running and setting the weapons down to the side and running back to the stage to get in formation. And I looked at one of the masters, Master Yanshu, and I said, Master Yanshu, cool, 120 hyped up kids with weapons. And he said, but they were so professional. Even the smallest of them were so professional and disciplined. It was really cool to see.
I was gonna say that's a testament to the discipline of the craft, correct?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it really was.
And I think we all in that room got to see real superhumans. And this is where I think part of the appeal of what we're really trying to share with Immortals, like, hey, there's a superhero inside all of us. It doesn't require leotards, and how we really access our natural power is by going inward and tapping and igniting that hero that doesn't require leotards, does not require radioactive spiders or some gobbling cosmic weight to fall on you. And the important thing is you have to make a choice.
That's what I was going to say. Personal choice.
And you discipline yourself, and this is where the true magic happens. And this is how superhumans have been created out of this kind of timeless lineage, and that's the true essence of Kung Fu. So when we're kind of casting the past and the present, the future of Kung Fu is that I believe we have an opportunity to take this essence, this empowering vision that's already also backed by real technologies, and infuse it in storytelling.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's the missing piece, right? I mean, superheroes are great, but I feel like what we really have been short on, the opportunity, is the how part. How does this happen?
Yeah.
So we're kind of really filling that in, and with our first 4 stories, Adept, Fa Sheng, Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman, and Assassin G, we really dive into the how through a bunch of different archetypes. Like, how do people really transform themselves? And it's also for this reason we wanted to choose, someone like Benjamin, who is a real life hero, who has endured those hardships. He was put in a position where he had to go through it.
Yeah. And then make a choice, essentially, so like, no, I love that.
There's like reality, there's real nuggets there. Because I think, look, let's be real. The world is going through a really, really fucking hard time right now.
Yeah.
Any person who's not saying it is checked out or lying or just out to lunch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like we need an inspiration that's reflective of what we're all going through, and hopefully with some nutrition and some real there that could, that can ignite all of us, because we know the government's not coming.
Right.
And it's not
what was it that Reagan said? The scariest words in the English language are, "We're from the government and we're here to help."
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just thinking how much of a parallel, based upon the things you said about Shaolin, and what it takes in terms of looking inward and having discipline. I feel like a lot of that can be said about making independent comics, because a lot of it's DIY. A lot of it's looking inward and looking for the things that you want to put into your story that you share. And a lot of those stories, especially in indie comics, are very personal. So, and then having the discipline to follow through and to create it and to go to shows and to promote it and to do all that stuff. I feel like, now I'm not trying to, it's comparing apples to oranges when you're holding them side by side, but some of the practices are the same.
Well, you're actually making a really good point, and that's one of the big things that we shared on that stage, which mastery means kung fu. It doesn't mean a martial art. So yes, you're talking about the comics, the kung fu that's required to have mastery over the indie comic process, which, as we all know, is, it's got to be an endeavor of love and total commitment.
It's heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, and it's,
So that's kung fu too. That is kung fu.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
part of my own kung fu from the discipline and mastery perspective has been about working on my writing, and Pewan's been very supportive of that over the years. And in fact, I just applied to the master's in writing for episodic TV, which to me has the closest parallels to comics. And Pewan wrote one of my letters of recommendation there. So that's part of how I want to continue this. We haven't gotten into specific narrative of my story, partially because we don't have editorial notes from Bob Harris yet, et cetera, et cetera. But what I did want to do is just say some of the things from my story that I wanted to bring out were really just about personal accountability and personal choice, and really using the time you have. Because a lot of people in prison are saying, when I get out, I'm going to do this, or if my appeal goes through, I'm going to do this. But at some point I had to stop and say, okay, my life is now. What I'm doing today has to matter, whether I'm in a box, a cage, on a cliff, and it doesn't matter. What I'm doing now has to matter. So when I read the stories, when Pewan first mentioned it to me and read all of the comics, I had to look and say, okay, so the one through line is this incredible character, Fa Sheng, this monk who in one case appears to people in their dreams, but he is sort of the through line of, he is kind of the awakener. He is the one who helps each of the heroes awaken. Here he is right there. Ta-da.
Here's Fa Sheng.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
picture.
that's awesome.
So
that's great
when I
artwork
thought of
too.
that,
It looked really nice.
Beautiful artwork. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then I thought how that would translate, and I thought, could I see a character finding their awakening in that dark place of prison? Absolutely, I could. So the first thing I pictured when I started deciding whether I wanted to do it was someone like in a meditation position on a prison bunk. And then when he goes to this other world, to this dream world where Fa Sheng is and may not awaken him, I just saw him suddenly on a similar shaped rock, but high above Wudang Mountain, to use a crouching tiger reference or something. So that's more of an idea than it is. So the art that we did show there on the picture is just concept art. That was an intern, Nicholas Wong. We'll put his Instagram up later so you can see that. But this isn't official work. It's just a concept art, but it does kind of capture some of the image of what we're trying to create. I do know that what I wanted to add as a complexity of the story, without getting super narrative, is just that people always say, oh, this person was innocent, they didn't do that. But in reality, when you review your actions on any given day or in any incident, there are always things you did wrong. So I thought it would be powerful to have a character who didn't do this one thing, but has done other things people don't know about. And then dealing with issues like, is it karma? Did I deserve it? What does innocent mean? Because the reality is, I don't believe that anybody's really innocent. And it really isn't our place to point at someone and say that person doesn't deserve a second chance. And I think that things are all about making the choice. If you want to become a hero, you have to start making choices. Philip Roth, who won a Pulitzer for a bunch of books, and in a book called The Human Stain, he said, every major choice in life means saying, I don't know you, to someone. And I thought that's really kind of what change is about, and deciding who are the people you want to be with. Pewan and I have been through some of the trenches. And from that perspective, a lot of us have been through these same trenches in Comic-Con and trying to bring stories that can inspire change. And I feel like we're on a parallel path, and I'm privileged to be a part of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I wanted to circle back to you guys mentioned Bob Harris. Is that the same Bob Harris that was part of Marvel back in the day?
Yes.
Was it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because he was like one of the head editors there, right? Or something?
No, he was the only human who's been editor-in-chief of both Marvel and DC.
Oh, that's okay.
So
Yeah, I forgot he was editor in chief.
Yeah. Well,
that's awesome. And so, how did he come to work for you guys?
Well, he was introduced through our head of publishing, who ran publishing at DC. They were colleagues.
Okay.
And just because the wuxia world is so storied and frankly so wildly fantastical, and we had such a deep reservoir of stories, I wanted someone who's very, very seasoned in executing very, very complex worlds and building, multiple franchises out of them. So Bob was a really, really good candidate. We just hit it off when we met, and I told him, look, you come from a storied career, but I want to go completely something different. I want to do something completely different. And, are you game for helping us develop the next generation and help bring new voices to the table? And that was something that intrigued them. So off to the races. And now we're, now into our second year of collaborating, and I'm just, and he's really left his imprint on what we're calling the foundational layer of Immortal, which is actually live on Kickstarter right now, where we've relied on single issue comics to get to this point. So now this is a really fun moment where I can pull back the veil and say, guys, we're actually building the world.
Right. And so this is for a collected edition that's on Kickstarter currently?
Yeah, this is a collector's edition, and we're going to go to print on here it is. We got 18 days to go. We're kind of releasing the multiple titles for the first time and really talking about our work to turn the page on superheroes. Not that superheroes haven't been awesome. We're just like, hey, it's time for a new voice that's reflective of our world. We also want to know how people become heroes rather than just importantly, and that it comes from decision, it comes from accessibility, and then also kind of taking a real take on heroes and, including people like Benjamin who really have something to say rather than, and having those kind of nutritious nuggets be transformative. So, and of course, I think we're also looking for a new aesthetic. And I think, it's already trending to be the new voice if you look at manga and anime and for people under 35. And so we have an opportunity to do something that people have been waiting for. And this is our take on it. So this is the Immortal Storyverse. We're turning the page on superheroes.
Very cool. Congrats on smashing the goal, by the way.
Yeah. With 18 days to go, there's a lot.
18 days to go, and you're already overperformed.
A lot more to make. One thing I wanted to ask. So, do you guys? So I see it's multiple storylines, different characters, and everything. Mm-hmm. Do you guys treat it like something like the Marvel universe, where all these characters exist in the same world?
It's a shared universe
with each other.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a shared universe. Actually, these 4 titles right now. I've already talked about the Adept, which is kind of the grounded kung fu. Assassin G is kind of where Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would live. But our story takes place in the 1980s, and then Fa Sheng, who's the Shaolin master. We meet him when he's pre-hero, so this is 1900, and then Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman is modern day. So they're actually intertwined. The stories that take place between these 4 characters, there are a lot of Easter eggs, and they kind of lay the foundation for the Immortal Storyverse world. And we're going to see that this world is very similar to ours, to our own right now. It's going to be a recognizable world with all the confusion, the chaos, the craziness that's going on.
But based in Los Angeles this time.
So we have a new take on Gotham. I don't know where you guys are, but we decided to make it West Coast. So that there's a new Gotham. It's a city of angels.
Oh, cool.
They lay the foundation for the introduction of new characters that are going to be launched and awakening in that world, including, the character that we're working on with Benjamin.
And also, Peiwan didn't mention, but he's one of the writers here for Immortal Swordsman too. He's also one of the creators.
Artwork. You got some really good top talent here working on the books. Really good stuff.
Now, so we have some really, really amazing artwork, and we're kind of seeing a level of action and engagement, and I think energy and metaphysics and flow that is unparalleled. And our commitment, Also, our my relationship with the Shaolin Temple means that we're not fucking around with our actual depictions. The ideas. We actually have choreographers that work with all the actions. They actually are very authentic and real. And that martial
work
arts
with the artists to like make it look authentic on the page.
It's an extra layer of work. Gene Ching, the publisher of Things with Magazine.
Even the artwork kicks ass.
Yeah.
And that's from the graphics guy.
Right.
Like several of us are real practitioners, and we want to bring that level of authenticity. The same is true for like Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman, where we talk about immortality. We actually are pulling it directly from like the Taoist secret texts on how theoretically they actually create immortality and immortal beings. So that's part of like what makes it really fun and interesting and authentic at the same time.
Beautiful. It's built in the context of that legacy. That you're building it off of something that actually exists out there. You could read the book, and what might seem fantastical is actually legit. And in the context there.
Yeah,
I like looking at the 4 titles, and it's like different flavors too. You can tell there's different different people be attracted to different titles, and
there's something in it for everybody. And look, we're a bunch of we're just talking in the boys' room here, but half of our characters our lead characters are led by women. So there's a big, we call it the martial heroine vibe in Immortal, where we're kind of bringing our mothers, daughters, and girlfriends and wives to the forefront, and depicting them as the heroes that they deserve to be. And then when the yin and the yang come together, it's a whole new layer of both romance and also, I think, unity.
What does your symbol mean? The logo, that 6.
This is the Immortal Flame, by the way. It's on my arm.
Okay, yes.
Oh, okay. I like that. This is this cover, and I don't know if this was intentional. It reminds me of Lone Wolf and Cub for some reason. I get that vibe from it a lot, and I don't know why. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's the way it's drawn. Like I don't know. It reminds me of that a lot.
I like the Assassin G #2 cover. I wanted to fuck my world up.
She does that.
This one looks great, dude.
Yeah, this is the book that I wrote. I created the master narrative of the universe. So I'm known as the creator of the Immortal Storyverse. That's kind of the meta world. But just because this story was really important to me, this is actually where the name of Immortal comes from. This is my father's one of my father's books that I love the most. And it's called Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman. So it's a really important part of the Immortal canon. It introduces the mega villain that we're going to see in the first iteration. His name is Swordbeard. So,
gotcha. Out of the 4, that's the one I'm attracted to the most.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
One thing, just saying something about Bob Harris real quickly. I saw Pawan had an event. It was sort of like an intro event at a martial arts museum. And that was the first time I'd heard Bob speak. And that was pretty impressive. Like he got to talking about, when I realized who he was and started kind of Googling him on my phone as he was speaking, I thought, oh, this is amazing. And he basically said that he was tired of the godlike Superman superhero where it's just sort of like you're either born a god or you're not. There's no personal choice. There's no growth elements. And what he loved about this was that it was about people finding the hero within instead of just becoming them because of as Pawan said, a radioactive spider bite or something. And he actually wanted to leave that world and come into this one because he thought he loved the fact that here, with personal choice and discipline, anyone can be the one.
It's cool that it's street level. It's a street level kind of thing. Even though it has like fantastical elements and it's deeply rooted in myth, it's got street level kind of stakes, it seems like. Which is cool.
Yeah, it does. I'm glad you're calling that out. And something that we really care about is emotional authenticity. When you read it and you read about the characters, you're like, whoa, this is some real shit. Like, I know these feelings. I felt that way before.
Yep.
I like that you're like, so is every creator kind of like Ben, where you go and you kind of pick out somebody that has like a unique like backstory? What's that?
It's an experiment. We started with 4 amazing creators for a variety of reasons. Charlie Stigney has done and Tasha Hui, 2 creators, both with unique perspectives and strengths. We wanted to bring both of those together in the Adept, so they helped launch the Adept. Whereas, I kind of created the characters to begin with. And then Immortal Swordsman, I already talked a little bit about. So it was me kind of adding some of my observations about life. Fa Sheng is written by Ryland Grant, who is actually an ordained Zen monk.
Oh, wow.
Also an indie comic creator. And then I chose a writer on the television show Supergirl, Jen Troy, to bring life into Assassin G. So those were like the first 4 choices. We kind of chose a combination of craft, personal story, but because there were already pretty strongly developed characters already for them to lean into, so that was the first wave. And the second wave, we wanted to experiment with more out-of-the-box personal narratives, people with compelling life experiences that are broadly representative of our mission, with a lot of real transformative nuggets.
Gotcha.
So
for me, a
that
nugget,
real life experience to the comic as well.
Yeah, they could actually
to this
bring
being,
that. Yeah.
Sorry, go on,
I can't
Ben.
commit to this being in anything, but I wanted to at least pitch it while Peiwan's there, so he can't run away because we're all on screen. But no, one thing, there is a moment I had for me that was probably most transformative in prison, and that was that I had decided, because of my case, and my case did involve a fight, but not my part of it didn't involve killing anyone, and I had to make some real serious choices where I was. I had to decide to not get in trouble. I had to decide not to join any gangs. I had to decide, and these are very scary decisions when you're in there, because if you don't, you're oftentimes just on your own. So when I first got to a cell, I still had my bedroll in my hand and walked up, and the electronic door shut behind me, and a guy walks up to the door and says, "All right, check it out. You're a lifer. Stuff's going to be expected of you." And he starts explaining this whole thing about the white gang. And I said, "Yeah, look, I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't borrow any money. I don't need any money from anyone. I'm pretty good with a pen if anybody needs help filing paperwork or something. I don't gamble. You're not going to get in any kind of trouble behind me, but I'm not going to stab somebody because he's black, brown, yellow, or white and owes money for dope. I'm just not doing it." And he said, "Well, you don't really have a choice, homeboy." Mm-hmm. And I thought about it for a second and said, "Everybody's got choices." And he was like, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" And I thought about it and said, "Well, I think it means I'm more afraid of God than I am of you." And he was like, "What?" And it was this kind of awkward moment. And my cellmate, who would be the one ordered to do anything to me if something happened to me, was burying his face in his hands. And the guy at the door said, "Is this dude serious?" And my cellmate said, "I don't know, man. He looks serious."
I love that. You blew that guy's mind.
Yeah.
Was your case ever resolved though? Or
no, it's still on appeal. I had 3 trials. It was overturned twice on appeal in the same judge's court. After the second trial, the judge did so many crazy things that he ended up getting subpoenaed. So my trial judge was on the stand getting cross-examined by my attorney. It's been nuts, but I'm not on parole. God. I'm not attached to any of this stuff anymore. I'm still fighting with stuff.
Obviously, you got released. Was there any kind of like a apology for stealing 18 years of your life, or nothing? Like, what do they say to you when they let you? I mean, obviously you're found innocent, right? Or
no, I was not
officially.
No, officially they just admitted that I didn't have any part in the murder and then attached to lesser charges. But then you want to say, okay, well, wouldn't that have been like 16 years less, or
Yeah,
but
right,
they don't really operate. They don't operate like that.
Do you feel as if you like? What do you think of? Do you have like nightmares still about that? I'd be like, so like, do you have regrets
at times?
Yeah,
but I guess I try to use fear, because fear is. I was in the Marine Corps, and they say fear is weakness leaving the body. That was one of their things to say. But for me, I realized that I could spend a lot of time wallowing in like what should have happened, or I can do something about it. It doesn't do any good to be bitter. It just makes me unhappy. It's like, the old saying that it's like, having hatred for somebody or trying to seek revenge is like or having bitterness in your heart is like taking poison and expecting your enemy to die. I don't want any of that stuff inside of me. And so I decided to make some positive changes myself. So I started a nonprofit, and it's, if you look at benfree.org, my nonprofit is there, and we're working on education and literacy through creative writing and the arts and journalism and things for people that are inside of prison. And I have a pet program called Bars with a Z, Behind Bars. That's literacy through rap poetry and creative writing. And we've got a couple of Pulitzer Prize winners signed on to support. And two of the people on my board have American Book Awards for poetry. We got a guy who won the San Francisco Film Festival for videography. And these are all people who had that experience and want to try to drag people out of it. So I could be complaining about what I was doing back there during that time, or I could try to reach down into the well and pull some other people out. There we go. There's some of our projects on the site. And that was on my podcast there. That was Garen. He got to talk about his own criminal justice experience because his father was locked up his whole life and he was raised without him. And there's Bars Behind Bars there on the right. So, I mean, we can use things that happen to us that are bad and to complain about, or we can use them to make us stronger and to try to make it so that other people don't have to go through the same things we did.
Yeah, well, it's
cool that you're beautiful that you're channeling that into the comics and into projects and really kind of making lemonade out of the best you can out of the situation you've been through.
Yeah, I actually have I have a point of view that, I mean, there's no amount of words I think that could actually, because if Benjamin's words are actually etched in reality. He's sharing these stories, which we're appreciating kind of just almost whimsically, but this guy had to live through it. Yeah. But I would say that it's really made him the person that he is, and it's given him kind of a unique point of view to really be of support and help to so many people who are following.
Another choice.
Yeah.
Another choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but gentlemen, on this note, I have dinner waiting for me. I'm really happy to have been given the chance to come in and say hello to you guys again, because I really admired your kung fu from across the aisles. And
well, it was great seeing you again, Peiwan. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come on the show and sharing the projects with us.
Yeah, and we really appreciate the effort to amplify our message. You guys, we're all indie creators, and you know what it takes, the kind of hustle. And if this opportunity can lead to a few blessings and a few people discovering us, then, or even frankly, it's been entirely worth it just to share this time with you guys and of course with Ben. Just we're thankful for you guys. And for this time that you've chosen to focus on Immortal, and of course supporting Ben's journey. He's
definitely. And
thank you, Peiwan. We're happy to signal boost for you guys.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing more from Immortal Studios and seeing you guys grow in the comic industry.
And we'd love to have you back on when you have future projects.
Yes. I'm gonna launch it here. We're about to announce our first major movie.
Oh, really? Awesome.
Yes. Yes.
So is it based off one of these comics?
Of course.
Nice.
It's going to be one of these faces we're looking at right now.
So I know you can't talk about it, but we do know it's one of these 4 comics on this.
It's one of these 4 comics. It's going to kick off the Immortal cinematic storyverse.
Awesome, man. I think people are hungry for the more kung fu and less superheroes and more, like more manga, more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think people want that now.
This is where we're coming in, and they want it, and they not only want it, they want the real deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Not chopsaki, not not just endless, mindless fighting and action, but the whole thing, real kung fu. So
real kung fu, real characters with heart and exactly.
Real philosophy that have been honed over thousands of years to actually awaken heroes, and that's the promise. And this is
when you look at the lines from Fa Sheng in these books, there's a real deep philosophy in the things he's telling these people. When he's talking to the people he's training and to the hero in each of the stories, if you really look at what he's saying, there's very deep principles of Tao and of life coming across from those pages. It's some serious bars being dropped from Fa Sheng in these books.
And kudos to Ryland Grant. So it's taking that of approach. And again, thank you guys. We're early in the journey. Every friendship, every relationship really matters. So I'm really grateful for you guys, and I look forward to continuing the journey. And hopefully we'll see you. We'll meet up again at Comic-Con this year. And to all your readers and listeners out there, we appreciate you listening in. And if this is intriguing, I want to invite you to be amongst the first to help usher in this new universe. It's called the Immortal Storyverse.
That's great. We got already comment in. This looks great. The art looks impressive, so we got people talking about it already. So
all right.
Thank you for joining us, Peiwan.
Yeah. Peiwan.
Thanks, Pei. And hopefully your dinner's not too cold.
No, this is entirely worth it. This is entirely
excellent.
I would stay longer if I weren't so hungry.
Yeah. We'll come back and
Please come back in the future.
Road,
Thanks for the invitation, gents. And
absolutely.
Good work.
Yep. All right, you have a great day.
See you, man.
Bye.
Before we click off the Kickstarter page, I was gonna run the video. Is it too long, Ben, or is it just?
No, I don't think so. And if you can get partway through it, I don't think it's too long. In fact, we didn't mention him, but Thomas Geus has been hired also, and he was running the Zoom room, and Peiwan was saying, "Hey, can you do this?" And I thought it was like some admin tech until I Googled him, and it said president of Fox International, and I said, "Oh, he's not the new help." So Thomas has been brought on board to bring these stories and turn them into movies.
Oh, very awesome!
Yeah, let's run the video.
Yeah, let's run this. Yeah, let's run the video. Let's roll the footage.
I've been a lifelong fan of the superhero genre. Lots of money, lots of time, lots of energy, lots of conversations. But come on, enough is enough. Do we really need another fancy leotard, another made-up superpower, another intergalactic battle? I'm Pei Huan. I'm the founder of Immortal Studios. We are drawing a line in the sand. A new era has arrived. We are releasing the next chapters of all of our titles together. It's never happened like that before. So if you've been jonesing for the next chapters, you get all of them together in one fell swoop. We are talking about the next issue of The Adept.
That's Amy. She's badass.
The next issue of Chronicles of the Immortal Swordsman. The next issue of Fa Sheng. The next issue of Assassin G. And a few surprises. These 4 titles are actually interconnected and they're being released together. You'll be able to see some rhyme and the reason, the Easter eggs, how they're interconnected, and frankly, the depth and breadth, the beauty, the ambition of this world. Immortal has always been powered from day one by you, our fans, members of our community. This is no different except on a larger scale. So I want to invite you personally to sign up in this campaign, join us on Kickstarter, help us turn the page. Let's do it together.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Did you see my cameo in the background?
I saw Johnny's cameo.
I was going to play Where's Waldo real quick, but
I know, right? Where's Johnny?
That is fantastic. Yeah, this looks great. So everyone check it out.
I'm really excited for Assassin G. I gotta pick up that book. That looks really good.
Yes. Actually, the one really that's cool speaking to me is the Immortal Swordsman. The art, the character looks cool, but they all look good. They honestly all look great.
They really do.
So,
my favorite because of the story is actually the first one, But you never know when you first see something, if it's because it's the first one you experience that it's special, or if it's because it's genuinely the best. But I just like the story of Amy is this character who is raised in foster care. She tries to protect her sister, but they get separated. So she grows up feeling guilty because she can't take care of her. So when it starts off, they finally reunited and they're at this concert with some pop star. But Amy thinks she's nuts because every time she falls asleep as a little girl, there's this Shaolin monk waiting to train her, to the point where she's basically like, oh God, not this guy again. It's been happening her whole life. But she doesn't tell people about it because it's weird. And there's this sort of like terrorist attack at the concert where these fake cops sort of rush the stage and try to convince the pop star that someone's going to kidnap her, and they try to get close. And Amy whispers to her sister, those aren't really cops. She's like, how do you know that? She goes, I don't know, I just do. And then just as the cops are about to grab Amy, this monk jumps out and starts beating the heck out of these fake cops. And she flashes and says, that's him. And then they cut to her, at this kind of sepia toned flashback scene of her in one of her dreams being trained by this monk. And he acts like it's normal to see her, like, here, get her to safety. Like it's the most normal thing in the world. But she realizes that this guy she has only dreamed before is right there and is in the room. And so there's a cool scene where she gets attacked and gets basically awakened. And that's the first moment she actually realizes that the stuff she's been learning in her dreams is real. So she's in this position like this going, like, what did I just do?
It's like a Jason Bourne, like, oh, I don't realize I have this skill set within me. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
I know the guy over there is 218 pounds and has a gun in his ankle holster. I don't know why I know that. And I don't know why I just answered this person in Polish. Yeah.
That's great. So Ben, when is your comic coming in their next wave? Is that when it's?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the plan. In fact, this is kind of embarrassing, but it's fun. And since you're all involved in comics, you can appreciate this. But Peiwan sent me a picture of him and Bob Harris in New York next to some fireplace. And then Peiwan just said, we have slated our book for next year. And I said, I didn't really know what it meant. So I just said, okay, well, congrats. And then he texted back, congrats to you. And so I stared at it for a second, and I immediately took a screenshot and sent it to Rylan and said, Rylan, I just got this as a text. I pretended to know exactly what it means. What are they talking about? And Rylan started laughing. He sent back a laughing my ass off emoji and said, well, it sounds like they slated your book and they're pretty excited about it. So congratulations. I said, man, they've been sitting on my treatment for like 4 months without a word. And I mentioned that to Jen Troy, and she said, there was one of these times that I didn't even know that they had gone with my writing until I found out it was being published. Like she said, they don't tell us much.
Well, that and things move slowly, when there's like a kind of a company involved, Like they do move a little slowly, so
indie comics do move kind of at a half pace slower than let's face it, a full pace slower than mainstream comics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if we're going to be more honest, the bad guy in our comics would be a glacier, Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. So can you tell us a little more about your comic, or is it like kind of you have to wait till they?
Well, I can say that like I have ideas for what's important to me about the character, so I can talk about character, but not so much narrative. That's actually why they accepted this piece of artwork for it, because conceptually it was a guy in a dark place finding the light within him. So that's I haven't gotten Bob's notes yet. I wrote basically the first, like a treatment for issue 1, and then sort of an outline for the 3 more issues about what happened. But to me, a lot of the main things was that this character has been, I gave him a name. I named him Jeremy Erlinger, just because Erlinger means bringer of light or bringer of dawn. I thought it was, so if we don't go with that name, I want to go with something similar that has an actual meaning to the name, just not one that's been scotch taped onto the top of it. But
gotcha.
I want it to be about the personal journey and about those moments. Like I want to put that moment in as well, about being more afraid of God than this person in front of them. And that also has to do with just honoring yourself more than you're honoring
giving yourself
what people are trying to get you to
higher purpose and stuff like that. Yeah.
And so I want that to be about discipline and about some of the training, and also I want people to see someone struggle. One thing I have done that's unique here, because I work in the criminal and restorative justice space and have been going into prisons to speak and whatnot, I have actually had a lot of close contact with bigger organizations. I published a lot when I was inside, but I was publishing stories and essays. I'm working on my memoir right now. One of my classes at UCLA is working one-on-one with individual professors. Last time I worked with Justin Torres, and he just won the National Book Award last week for his book called Blackouts. And this quarter I'm working with Adam Bradley, who wrote, along with Common's memoir and the anthology of rap. He just curated the hip hop 50 years of hip hop exhibit for the Grammys Museum. And so he's been working with me. I wanted to see what his kind of writing was like. And I opened that memoir for Common, and it said, when I was 18 months old, my mother and I were kidnapped at gunpoint. My father held the gun. And I was like, wow, dare you not to read that third sentence, you know?
Right.
So I've been focused on trying to get some of these stories and intentionally taking classes on comic and story development and things most of the places I'm applying have to do, you know, with colleges for my master's. I got a little less than a year. I've been applying to places that really are about story, but I think it's pretty important that people recognize that because we're the main character in a story, in our own story, I've had moments where I'm like, okay, I do realize I'm the main character in my story, but I'm not that nuts about the main character right now. I'm not being my best version of myself. And so I get a little meta because I start thinking, if I'm going to write a story that's based on my own story, there is a pretty big responsibility in that. And am I going to be living this life I'm not proud of while trying to make this other character do things that I only wish I could do? And I don't want to live like that. So I've been trying to find other people who respect the transformative power of story, of being inspired by just hearing something. And I also like things that exist on separate levels. Like Johnny C, he just pointed out the Assassin G cover and made a complimentary comment. Well, that's the cool thing about The Matrix, which is also wuxia, really. And you can either stop and say, hey, that little disc says simulacrum. That is an exact representation of something that was never there in the first place. That's deep. Or you can watch girls in spandex kick ass. You know, you can enjoy it on any level, depending on how much of yourself you want to put into it. And I like that kind of writing where you can enjoy the story and follow it, and you can tell that there's more depth underneath the surface of that iceberg.
Yep. I like that too.
I think the other part of that too is that you also uncover different types of reader bases after the fact. I mean, I've had people who approach me on Surrounded by Death that are seeing deeper things that I don't expect the common reader to see. You know, behaviors of characters that are very subtle that would indicate, oh, they are maybe on the spectrum, or they would come from a perspective of a certain way of life. So it's very cool when you could have a reader see that kind of depth, like you said, in a character or in a story.
So the depth I'm trying to bring to this, and also because I have a higher purpose in not just telling the story, but also kind of bringing these difficulties and these lessons learned in really difficult places. Like, those are really valuable when you learn those things, and you learn what things about people and human nature and stuff that you didn't know. Some things you learn are horrible, but those are still valuable. And I decided, because of all these other, I've been working with Penn America. Columbia University has a magazine called Exchange, which was originally spelled little EX, all caps change. And they had worked with formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated writers. Prison Journalism Project, the Vera Institute of Justice. I had a lot of these things published in those places. Some really horrible things too that happened that were true, but these people in those spaces know that there's these horrors inside, and they want people to not repeat them. They want the people who are inside to have an opportunity for growth and change. Like, it doesn't work just locking people up forever. If you go to Norway and they talk about somebody having a life sentence, they're assuming you mean no longer than like 10, 12 years, because that's what that means there. Here, a life sentence could be, I know guys that did 45 years before someone finally said, okay, he hasn't been in trouble in 40 years. Maybe we should let him out. And so what I did is I have been addressing the people who are in charge of these organizations and the other employees and saying, I want to give you input. I haven't seen anyone do this before, but this character is going to spend 18 years in prison for something he didn't do. He's going to get out knowing he did things no one knows about. And he's having to cope with that and what that means for him personally. What kind of issues would you like to see society see him witness, see him go through? What obstacles, things about parole, the kinds of things that happen. A guy on my advisory board, Adamu Chen, his documentary, What These Walls Won't Hold, won the San Francisco Film Festival for mid-length film. And he was a Black Star mention. He's doing the whole circuit for this film. And it was about being locked up in San Quentin during COVID. Over 20 people died, what that was like for him and what that meant. When they went to this big festival in New York, his parole officer wouldn't let him go. So they had the festival and there was a chair there and he had to appear on the screen behind him on stage. It's like, seriously? I mean, the guy's never been in any kind of trouble. He's doing this film that's, opening so many eyes and creating so much awareness. And so the idea that someone would just say, oh, you can't go, like you can't approve it. I mean, it's going to be televised on all these stations. Right. You're going to see it right there. Right. When I first saw my parole officer had to get permission to go to Comic-Con, I almost felt sorry for the guy because the guy was a new parole officer. And I had to say, well, it just worked out like this, but I have to give you 3 travel passes at the same time. And they were all requests. He's like, so you want to go to Comic-Con to be on a writer's panel and you're going to be there a week? You want to host the Sam Watson Celebrity Golf Classic? You have to travel for that. And you're going into the prison you paroled from. You don't ask for much, do you? I said, hey, it's just kind of how it worked out. It's just all, I'm in media. Everything happens in the summer. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
But all this stuff happened at once. And granted, my situation is a little unusual, but not completely. I know other people that are doing similar things. And it's pretty exciting. I'm really hoping that I get into either UCLA or USC and stay here. There's also a cool creative writing program in San Diego. I know that my girlfriend would rather have me closer because it's a bit of a drive back and forth from San Diego all the time.
Yeah.
Now,
awesome.
I actually had a question, Benjamin. So in terms of the process of writing your story currently and knowing that Immortal Studios has some interconnectivity, do you find any challenges in terms of having to stay true to the character and stay true to your story, but also have to kind of fit into the overall larger umbrella of things?
No, what I'm kind of reminded of, it's sort of like poetry, because like I can write sonnets, and I learned to do that a while back. But a sonnet is, at least an English or Shakespearean sonnet, is 14 lines, 3 4-line stanzas and a couplet at the end, A, B, all the way down to where the last couplet rhymes. And when you know that that's the structure, you can write within it. And the challenge becomes, how do you make something beautiful that still fits into the structure? So when I first went to Comic-Con 2 summers ago, I was kind of getting the brief explanation from Jen Troy and from Ryland, and they were explaining how it worked. And they said, well, this story verse is based on the 4 pillars. Now, I realized at that point that no one knew who I was, and nobody realized that I had already been working from prison years earlier on the earliest iteration of some of these ideas with Peiwan. So they said, everything's broken down like into these 4 pillars. And I tried not to laugh. And at one point, the other writers said, what? I said, the title of my first treatment was The 4 Pillars. And they're like, oh, did he steal it? I go, no, he definitely did not steal it. He hired me to work on his thing with him. So he owns all that. But it was a little funny, the people trying to update me on stuff that I was involved in some of the earliest seeds of,
Right.
Man, that's awesome.
But I like that. And so I actually just saw, well, it would make sense to me then that this monk could awaken someone in prison and in this dark place, because it'd be easy to give up and be right at the lowest moment of despair. I mean, having your case overturned at all is incredibly rare. That almost never happens to any cases. Murder cases, less than 1%. Mine was overturned on appeal twice in the same judge's court. That guy's never getting promoted. But I'd have 3 trials 4 years apart each time. And I had to be in the LA County jail for 2 years prior to each one leading up to the trial. So it was this back and forth. Like, the one thing I didn't have that a lot of people had was they were doing time, but I wasn't ever really getting to do any time because I was always fighting. And I thought, okay, I can't even know that this is the date that I'm getting out. I started out with life without possibility of parole ×2. Then I went to the second trial and they acquitted me of the first degree and ended up getting like a combination of like involuntary manslaughter, even though I wasn't in the room when that guy died. I mean, it was this complicated scenario, but I just had to keep fighting. And then ultimately, like I kept wishing that someone would just say, here's your date. This is the date it's going to happen. And then ultimately I changed my mind on that. I kind of reversed because life doesn't do that. Life doesn't say, okay, don't worry. You can press pause for 2 weeks. Everybody else will pick up your light work. You'll be fine. It's not going to happen.
Right. Doesn't work that way. Awesome.
This guy that was kind of one of my mentors, he taught me how to play chess. And he used to talk to me about the importance of it being touch and move. You know, like you reach for the bishop and you touch it. You go, oh no, it's too late. You touch the piece, you have to move it somewhere. And life is touch and move. You have to be able to picture the board, what it's going to look like after you've made your next move. You can't just make a move and then go, oops, what am I doing in this lane? This is the wrong way on a one-way street. You know, we don't really get those kinds of choices. So I'm excited to be able to do something that really shows the importance of personal choice, but also it's an honor to me to be included in this universe. I grew up in martial arts studios. Peiwan didn't mention, but he is actually a Shaolin disciple.
Wow.
He's been studying with them, and he was recently he became a disciple of the Shaolin, and so that's pretty cool. Ryland Grant, who is a ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk, he's also taking 2 black belt tests from 2 different styles coming up here soon. So the martial arts part is really important here because it's part of the discipline, and I'm actually considering trying to join the Shaolin myself. There is one sanctioned temple that, one sanctioned school that's sanctioned by the temple in Los Angeles. So I'm going to go to Chinatown and I'll try to show pictures of me with Master Fa Shang and see if it gets me in.
Nice.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Awesome. So we're actually at an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm going to start wrapping this up. Isn't that crazy how it all
flew?
It flies by.
It's a pretty amazing story.
Yeah,
it is an amazing
conversation
story.
too.
I really appreciate having you guys.
Yeah, like when Johnny first told me about it, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I can't wait to meet this guy and like hear his story, you know, and like how he got
the ultimate story of adversity, you know. Like,
yeah, it really is. Most
people today don't understand how to deal with that adversity. You know, like they I've heard a friend's kid play a sport, like they joined track and they lost the first race. Like, forget I'm quitting. They don't get that. You know, I mean, your case is much more extreme, but you don't learn anything by winning all the time. You know, you
really don't.
You get better by losing, you know, and I mean, you've had the ultimate, I mean, I'm sure you'll learn a lot. You appreciate things now, and you're being a positive force, you know, to everyone.
And I
helping
a lot of people so many things
and turned it
into
it's
kind of like Job. After Job's trials, he was given back more than he had prior to that, and like now I'm in an apartment at UCLA. I don't even pay for this. It's part of my scholarship. I've got desks on both sides of the room, little bits of Asian influencer. And so they've been really good about that.
Are those real plants?
Half yes and half no.
The layout has some good feng shui.
Yeah, it does.
Exactly. So that's really, I guess, a good closing spot is just that I did ultimately get to a spot where I realized, you know what, because I grew up in the mean streets of South Redondo Beach. You know, it's like there was very, very little violence. There was very little. I mean, I didn't have much money growing up. I was always like the poorest kid in the rich neighborhood. My mom thought I would be safest like that. But if I wanted to do the things I'm doing right now, going on a podcast and talking to people about, like I talked to a guy who was wrongfully convicted and spent 37 years inside, and he wrote a book called All Men Are Created because he was picked out of a hat, you know, by this APHIS fingerprint registry. And they said it picked him out, but they didn't mention that it also picked out 9 other people and that he was the only black guy. So that was rough for him. But what I realized is I wouldn't have much of a story. I wouldn't have much of a testimony because I wouldn't have been able to understand so many of the things that people I now deal with go through. And now I have this understanding. One of my best friends is a guy named Casey. His entertainment name is Macca. And when we were inside, we used to talk entrepreneurial dreams, and he'd say he wanted to start a chain of sober living homes and use the money he got from that to start a multimedia center with podcasts and, reality shows and recording music. And so he got out in 2012. By the time I got out in 2021, he had 25 sober living homes, and he was running a studio called the world famous Coin Academy, where Yuck Mouth has his Smoke a Lot Radio. One of the guys from NWA has a podcast there called Above the Law. Corey Holcomb has a 5150 show. And I was on Macca's podcast, and that was the time that LinkedIn post came out. And when that went viral, he called me and said, "Hey man, I'm so sick of answering emails about your story. I'm just going to give you your own show." So I got down there and asked what kind of show it was. And he said it was a podcast. And I said, "Cool. What's a podcast?" And I mean, and so now we have this show that's under Ben Free Podcast. If you guys look it up on Apple, Spotify, all that, and it created something. And I wouldn't have been able to talk to these people in these spaces because I wouldn't really have been through anything that they could relate to. So even though bad stuff happened to me, I realized, there's that saying, that religious saying, "Take up your cross and follow me." It sounds cool if you're thinking of like a cool little necklace thing you can wear, but that's not really what the cross is for. That's like an instrument of sacrifice and torture.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
When I spent the first part of my time thinking, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? And I thought, wait a minute, if I'm really going to do this whole take up his cross and follow him thing, then it's possible that what's happening to me doesn't have anything to do with me. It might have to do with other people I'm supposed to reach later on after I make it through this tunnel. So that's really my parting words of wisdom, I guess, is that whatever we're going through, no matter how hard it is, we may be going through it so that we can help someone else we need to help who's having a similar problem.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. And Ben, anything else that you wanted to plug while you're here before we wrap things up?
Well, my Instagram is under Ben Free Project. That's the name of the nonprofit. It is also a UCLA sanctioned group now because I'm trying to get some help with all the work. But if you look up benfree.org or benfreeproject.org, it both goes to the same way. People can, of course, donate, check out the projects. Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, the reason you saw that picture of the packed house there at Comic-Con, I mentioned Lisa before, but her marketing and media company is called Extreme On Promotions. So if you check out Extreme On Promotions on Instagram, they do all sorts of events and media products and all kinds of things. So I wanted to give her a plug too.
And I was going to share your artist's Instagram as well.
I shared it in the chat as well. Nicholas Wong. Yeah.
Yeah. So
beautiful artwork on his page.
Yes.
Awesome. Harry, Johnny, anything else that you wanted to
Harry, I'll let you go first.
No, just a great, it's like I enjoy listening to your story, and it's just good to see that you're helping people. Just a good, a good role model, for everyone. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I agree. So many people go the other route,
Right. Yeah. So I think it's so easy to go the opposite.
Society. What's that?
Right.
What's
it's just about.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it's also just about teams, like accepting, the fact that we don't exist in a vacuum. I used to try to do everything solo, and that's why it's so important that whether you have good relationships, good friendships, like whenever any little thing like this happens, and I think of my girlfriend, Lisa, I'm reminded of that Jim Carrey quote. He said, "Behind every great man, there is a woman rolling her eyes."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Johnny, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to really just add, Ben, thank you for taking the time. You have a lot on your plate. There's a lot you're doing. So thank you for taking time out of your day to come on the show, sharing your story with our audience, sharing your projects with us. And it was just really wonderful to see you again since July, and just to kind of catch up and just to, kind of present you to the audience.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. One of these days I'll get out there and I'll meet you in person too, Ben. I've been always trying to get out to the Comic-Con myself, but it's such an expensive venture that
coming from the East is tough. Yeah,
it is to do everything, like the hotels, the food, all that.
Maybe we can make you like a special envoy to Immortal Studios. You can fly out here with the
maybe.
Abbott.
Yeah.
Oh, that wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Use
That might be.
You can use your
that
prep.
might be. Yeah, that might be.
Well, if
That
you
might be
guys
something
ever
to
need
do.
a master letterer, Keith is fantastic at lettering. So just throwing
Yeah,
that
if you
out
ever
there.
need a letterer, hit me up.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Cool.
And I just want to thank you as well, Ben. Nice meeting you. Nice hearing your story. Nice to meet
Paywan.
And Immortal Studios, and learning about that and learning about everything you guys do. And yeah, it's great.
And this will be available afterwards too, if we can do like more.
It should be live on the channel tomorrow. If you go to the YouTube channel, you have to just hit the tab for the live, and it should be up there.
Yeah, even when the show's over, it should be under the live tab.
Yeah, and I often will take like interviews that I do with people. I don't know when I would do it, but like it'll be soon. But I'll cut up sections of it and release it as its own video, like where you're talking about your story. I may do that, or even when
I appreciate it.
Even when we're talking about the origins of Immortal Studios, that sounds like be a good clip and everything. So it makes it for the people that don't want to watch like a 2-hour episode, can have like the nice and important chunks from the episode.
People who aren't as big of nerds as we are.
Exactly. You got it.
For those who suffer with severe ADHD.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I had a poem published about ADD. It's called Attention Deficit. What?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds about right. But all right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this awesome episode. We are actually off next week, believe it or not. After doing
off
like
for once. Yep.
What?
Happy
3
holidays.
months run in a row, so we're off next week, but then we'll be on for 2 weeks in a row after that. So
Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. Check us out and subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And more importantly, read some comics. All right, everybody. Have a great night, and we will talk to you later. Good night.